The gunshot echoed across the Montana prairie like thunder, leaving Delilah Reeves clutching her bleeding shoulder and watching through tear-blurred eyes as the man who had promised to marry her rode away with her life savings, her dignity, and her trust. The year was 1875, and she had traveled over 1,000 miles to marry a stranger who had just tried to kill her. "You're worth more dead than alive to me now," were the last words Charles Withers had spat at her before firing his pistol and leaving her for dead on the unforgiving plains. Delilah dragged herself toward a copse of trees, her white traveling dress growing crimson with each painful movement. 3 weeks ago, she had been a hopeful schoolteacher from Boston answering an advertisement for a wife. Now she was bleeding in the dirt, miles from civilization, with night approaching and wolves howling in the distance. The sound of hoofbeats made her freeze. Had Withers returned to finish what he started? Delilah pressed herself against the rough bark of a cottonwood, praying for invisibility as a tall figure on horseback approached. "Madam, you hurt." The voice was deep but gentle, nothing like the slick, false charm of Withers. Delilah peered up at the silhouette against the setting sun. A man sat atop a chestnut stallion, his face shadowed by a well-worn Stetson. What she could see was a strong jaw dusted with stubble and concerned eyes that seemed to shine even in shadow. "He left me for dead," she whispered, her voice breaking as darkness crept into the edges of her vision. Don't hurt me." The last thing she remembered was being lifted by strong arms and a voice promising, "You'll never fear again, madam, not while I draw breath." Delilah awakened to the crackle of a fire and the smell of coffee brewing. For one blessed moment, she thought she was back in Boston, that her father was making his morning coffee, and that she had never made the terrible decision to become a mail-order bride. Then pain lanced through her shoulder, and reality crashed back. "Easy now," said the same deep voice she'd heard before losing consciousness. "That shoulder's going to be tender for a while." She blinked, focusing on the man who sat across the small campfire. In the firelight, she could see him clearly tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-browned skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. His light brown hair was too long for Boston society but suited his weathered face. "Who are you?" Delilah managed, wincing as she tried to sit up. "Cole Blackburn, madam, rancher, found you bleeding by Cottonwood Creek." He poured coffee into a tin cup and carefully brought it to her. "Patched you up best I could. Bullet went clean through your lucky." "Lucky," she echoed bitterly, taking the cup with shaking hands. "Is that what I am?" Cole's expression darkened. "The man who did this to you, he's still around." "Gone," Delilah whispered, "with everything I own." She told him everything about answering the advertisement, about Charles Withers's charming letters describing his prosperous ranch and desire for a refined wife to share it with, about selling her meager inheritance to fund her journey west, only to be met with a different man than his letters had portrayed. "Realized I wasn't worth keeping once he had my money," she finished, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Said I was worth more dead than alive to him. Insurance against anyone looking for me, I suppose." Cole's hands tightened around his coffee cup until his knuckles whitened. "Withers, you said his name was?" Delilah nodded. "Charles Withers." "There's no Charles Withers owning any ranch around these parts," Cole said grimly. "But there's a man fits that description who's pulled this same trick before, goes by different names. What happens now?" Delilah asked, suddenly aware of how completely at this stranger's mercy she was. Cole looked at her steadily. "My ranch is about half a day's ride from here. You can rest there until you're healed up. Then, if you want, I can arrange passage back east for you." "I have nothing to go back to," Delilah admitted. "I gave up my teaching position, sold my belongings." "Then you'll stay until you figure things out," Cole said simply, as if offering shelter to a shooting victim was the most natural thing in the world. Delilah studied him warily. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." Cole's gaze shifted to the fire. "Let's just say I know what it's like to be left for dead." The next morning, Cole helped Delilah onto his horse, climbed up behind her, and set off toward his ranch. She was acutely aware of his chest at her back, his arms on either side of her as he held the reins. Despite her circumstances, she found herself drawing comfort from his solid presence. "How did you come to be a rancher?" she asked, partly to distract herself from the pain in her shoulder. "Came west after the war," Cole said. "Too many ghosts back in Pennsylvania, started as a cowhand, saved every penny. 5 years ago I bought my own spread." "The war changed many lives," Delilah murmured. She had lost her brother at Gettysburg and her father to grief shortly after. "Changed everything," Cole agreed quietly. They crested a hill, and Delilah gasped. Below them stretched a green valley cut by a silver ribbon of river. Nestled against the foothills was a modest but well-maintained ranch house, several outbuildings and corrals filled with horses. "Welcome to Blackburn Ranch," Cole said. As they approached, a weathered man with iron-gray hair emerged from the barn, followed by a younger man and a boy of about 16. "You bring home strays of all kinds, boss," the older man called out, "but this is a first." "Delilah Reeves, meet Hank Peterson, my foreman," Cole said as he carefully helped her down. "And that's Miguel and his son Tomás. They work the ranch with us." "Miss," Hank said, tipping his hat but eyeing her blood-stained dress with concern. Cole quickly explained the situation, omitting the details but making it clear that Delilah was to be treated as an honored guest. "She'll be staying in my mother's old room until she's recovered." Delilah was too exhausted to protest as Cole carried her into the house. The bedroom he brought her to was simple but clean, with a handmade quilt on the bed and curtains framing a window that overlooked the mountains. "It's not what you're used to in Boston," Cole said, looking suddenly uncertain. Delilah touched his arm. "It's perfect, thank you." The next few days passed in a haze of pain and healing. Cole's housekeeper, a Cheyenne woman named Morning Star who lived in a cabin nearby with her trapper husband, tended to Delilah's wound with herbs and poultices that worked better than any Boston doctor's remedies. Cole himself was often busy with ranch work, but he made time to check on her each day, bringing wildflowers once and a book of poetry another time, explaining awkwardly that it had been his mother's. "You're full of surprises, Mr. Blackburn," Delilah said, leafing through the volume of Wordsworth. "A cowboy who reads poetry." "Cole," he corrected. "And my mother was determined I'd have some culture, even after we moved west when I was a boy." By the end of the first week, Delilah was able to leave her bed and sit on the porch, watching the daily activities of the ranch. She observed Cole with his men firm but fair, quick with a joke, and the first to tackle the hardest jobs. "He's a good man," Morning Star said, joining Delilah on the porch. "Saved my husband's life 2 winters ago when others would have left a half Cheyenne trapper to die in the snow." "He seems to make a habit of rescuing people," Delilah said. Morning Star gave her a penetrating look. "Perhaps because he could not save his wife and child." Delilah's heart clenched. "What happened?" "Fever 5 years past, just after he bought this land." Morning Star's eyes softened. "He has not looked at a woman since then, until now," Delilah flushed. "He's just being kind, yes. But there is more in his eyes when he watches you." As her strength returned, Delilah found herself wanting to be useful. She began by helping Morning Star with simple household tasks, then asked if she might take over some of the cooking to repay Cole's hospitality. "You don't need to earn your keep," Cole protested when he found her making biscuits one morning. "I want to contribute," Delilah insisted. "I've never been one for idleness." Soon she was taking charge of the household, bringing order to the bachelor's domain. She discovered that Cole had been selling his mother's hand-me-down china piece by piece to traders when money was tight, and silently resolved to find a way to replace it someday. One evening, as summer waned and the first hints of autumn tinged the air, Delilah found Cole sitting alone on the porch steps, staring at the sunset. "May I join you?" she asked. He nodded, making room for her beside him. For a while they sat in companionable silence. "I received word today," Cole finally said. "The man who shot you has been spotted in Denver," Delilah's heart stuttered. How do you know? I've had friends keeping an eye out. Seems he's looking for another bride. Cole's jaw tightened. I'm riding out tomorrow. To do what? Delilah asked, though she feared she knew the answer. Cole looked at her directly. To make sure he never hurts another woman like he hurt you. You can't kill him, Delilah said, gripping Cole's arm. I won't have you hang for murder on my account. I wasn't planning on killing him, Cole said grimly, just bringing him to justice. The sheriff in Denver has papers on him. Then I'm coming with you, Delilah declared. Cole shook his head. Too dangerous. He shot me and left me for dead, Delilah reminded him. I have more right than anyone to see him face justice. They argued late into the night, but in the end, Cole recognized the steel beneath Delilah's gentle exterior. 2 days later, they boarded the train to Denver, Delilah wearing a borrowed dress and a determined expression. Denver was a city in transition, part refined society, part wild frontier. Cole secured rooms at a modest hotel, insisting on separate accommodations despite the expense. Your reputation has suffered enough, he said when she protested the cost. The next morning, they visited the sheriff's office. The lawman, a burly, mustached veteran named Sheriff Hammond, listened to their story with growing interest. This fits the pattern, he confirmed. Man calling himself Charles Withers now, but he's been James Miller, Edward Smith, and half a dozen other names. Always targeting women back east looking for husbands, usually just robs them though, shooting you is a new level of violence. How do we find him? Cole asked. He's staying at the Denver Grand Hotel playing the wealthy rancher. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. But we need proof to connect him to previous crimes. I have his letters, Delilah offered, and I can identify him. A plan was formed. That evening, Delilah would pose as a newly arrived potential bride at the hotel restaurant where Withers was known to dine. Cole and the sheriff would be watching, ready to intervene. As dusk approached, Delilah sat before the small mirror in her hotel room, pinning up her hair. Her hands trembled slightly, but her resolve was firm. A knock at the door revealed Cole, dressed in a clean suit that transformed him from rugged rancher to respectable businessman. His eyes widened when he saw her in the blue dress borrowed from a shopkeeper's wife back home. You look. He started, then seemed to lose his words. Well, I do. Delilah asked nervously. For the plan, you'll do, Cole said softly. Too well, maybe. At the Denver Grand, Delilah was seated at a table alone as arranged. Her heart nearly stopped when Charles Withers walked in the same handsome face that had greeted her at the station months ago, the same calculating eyes that had watched her as he pulled the trigger. He spotted her almost immediately. A woman dining alone was unusual enough to draw attention. As predicted, he approached her table with a practiced smile. A lovely lady should never dine alone, he said smoothly. Charles Withers, at your service. It took every ounce of Delilah's willpower not to flinch at his touch when he kissed her hand. Delilah Mason, she lied, using her mother's maiden name. Just arrived from Philadelphia. Philadelphia, I have business interests there, Withers claimed, inviting himself to sit across from her. What brings you to Denver, Miss Mason? I've come west to start anew, Delilah said, the truth serving her purpose. My teaching position ended, and there seemed nothing left for me in the East. Withers leaned forward, all charm and interest. A teacher, how fortunate. I've been looking for a tutor for my ward, my late brother's child. Perhaps this meeting was fate. As he spun his lies, Delilah noticed Cole watching from the bar, his expression darkening with every smile Withers bestowed on her. The sheriff sat nearby, nursing a drink and waiting for their signal. I've recently purchased a ranch north of here, Withers continued. Beautiful country. I find myself in need of companionship as well as a tutor. Perhaps you might consider. Did you offer the same to Delilah Reeves? She asked quietly. Withers's smile faltered momentarily, then resumed. I'm afraid I don't know anyone by that name. Strange, Delilah said, pulling off her glove to reveal a small scar on her hand. You remarked on this scar when we met at the train station in Billings. right before you took my money and shot me." Withers's face hardened, his hand moving toward his jacket. "You made a mistake coming here." "The only mistake was leaving me alive," Delilah said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. In one fluid movement, Withers pulled a derringer from his jacket, but before he could aim it, Cole was there, grabbing his wrist and slamming it against the table. The gun clattered to the floor as the sheriff approached, badge displayed. "Charles Withers, or whatever your real name is," Sheriff Hammond announced, "you're under arrest for fraud, theft, and attempted murder." The commotion drew everyone's attention. A woman near the bar stood up suddenly, pointing at Withers. "That's him. That's the man who stole my inheritance." Another voice joined in, a hotel maid who recognized him as the man who had abandoned her sister in Kansas City after taking her savings. As Withers was led away in handcuffs, hurling threats and denials, Delilah found herself trembling uncontrollably. Cole wrapped his arm around her, leading her away from the curious onlookers. "It's over," he murmured. "He'll hang for what he's done." "I thought I would feel vindicated," Delilah whispered. "Instead, I just feel hollow." Cole gently tilted her chin up. "That hollow will fill again in time. With better things." The following weeks were a whirlwind. Withers's true identity was revealed as Theodore Langston, wanted in 4 states for various crimes. Several of his victims came forward, and through their testimony, some of Delilah's money was recovered from his hotel room. The newspapers dubbed Delilah the bride who lived, turning her into something of a local celebrity. She received 3 offers of marriage and 2 job proposals before she and Cole even left Denver. "You have choices now," Cole said as they boarded the train home. His voice was carefully neutral, but Delilah caught the tension in his jaw. "You could stay in Denver or go back east." "Is that what you want?" she asked quietly. Cole stared out the window for a long moment. "What I want doesn't matter. You deserve a real life, not one thrust upon you by circumstance. And if the life I want is at Blackburn Ranch," Delilah pressed. Cole's eyes met hers, hope warring with caution. "You hardly know me." "I know you're the man who found me bleeding and didn't leave me to die," Delilah said. "I know you're the man who reads poetry and treats your workers with respect and remembers how your mother liked her tea. I know more about the kind of man you are than most wives learn in years of marriage." The train whistle blew, drowning out whatever Cole might have said in response. They traveled in silence, both lost in thought, until the familiar landscape of home appeared on the horizon. Home. The word echoed in Delilah's mind. Somehow, in the months since Cole had found her, his ranch had become home in a way Boston never had been. As autumn deepened into winter, Delilah found her place at Blackburn Ranch. She started a small school for the children of neighboring ranches, teaching 3 days a week in a converted storeroom. The other days, she helped Cole with the ranch accounts, discovering a talent for business that complemented his practical knowledge. They fell into an easy rhythm together, sharing meals and conversations that stretched late into the evening. Yet something unspoken hung between them, a possibility neither seemed brave enough to acknowledge. The first snow came early that year, blanketing the valley in white. Cole rode out to check on a pregnant mare at the far pasture and hadn't returned by nightfall. Delilah paced the house anxiously as Hank and Miguel prepared to search for him. "Blizzard's coming," Hank warned, looking at the darkening sky. "If we don't find him soon." The door burst open, bringing a swirl of snow and a half-frozen Cole. Delilah rushed to him, helping him shed his ice-crusted coat. "The mare?" she asked, knowing his priorities. "Foaled successfully," Cole managed through chattering teeth. "Had to stay until I was sure both would make it." Delilah pushed him toward the fire, wrapping blankets around his shoulders while Hank poured whiskey and Miguel stoked the flames higher. Later, after the men had retired and Cole had thought enough to speak normally, they sat before the fire alone. "You were worried," Cole observed, watching her face in the firelight. "Of course I was worried," Delilah said. "I thought I might lose you." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with unintended meaning. Would that have mattered so much? Cole asked softly. Delilah met his gaze directly. It would have mattered more than anything. Cole reached for her hand, his calloused fingers wrapping gently around hers. When I found you that day by the creek, I thought I was just doing what any decent man would do. I didn't expect. What? Delilah prompted when he fell silent. I didn't expect to find my heart again, Cole finished. I buried it with Sarah and our baby, or thought I had. Delilah's eyes filled with tears. Cole, you don't owe me anything, he said quickly. Not gratitude, not affection. If you stay, I want it to be because you choose to, not because you feel obligated. Is that what you think? Delilah asked. That I feel obligated to you, don't you? In answer, Delilah leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, then deepened as Cole pulled her closer, his hand cradling her face as if she were something precious and fragile. When they finally parted, both breathless, Cole rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since Denver, he admitted. Why didn't you? Wasn't sure you wanted the same, Cole said, and I couldn't bear to see fear in your eyes if I was wrong. Delilah traced the line of his jaw with her fingertips. The only thing I fear is losing you. You won't, Cole promised, his voice husky. You'll never fear again, not while I draw breath. The words echoed those he'd spoken when he first found her, but now they held new meaning, a promise not just of safety but of love. They were married on Christmas Day, with snow falling gently outside the small church in town. Hank stood as Cole's best man, and Morning Star helped Delilah prepare, weaving white winter berries into her hair. You have healed him, Morning Star said as she adjusted Delilah's borrowed wedding dress. And he has healed you. Not completely, Delilah admitted. Sometimes I still wake up afraid. The scars remain, Morning Star nodded. But they remind us we survived. As Delilah walked toward Cole, who waited at the altar in a new suit ordered from Denver, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From desperate mail-order bride to shooting victim to teacher to beloved, it was not the life she had planned, but it was infinitely better than anything she could have imagined. Are you sure? Cole whispered as she reached him, giving her one last chance to change her mind. Delilah smiled, taking his hands in hers. More sure than I've ever been of anything. Spring came, bringing new life to the ranch, calves in the pastures, foals in the stables, and wildflowers on the hillsides. Delilah's school had grown to 12 students, and Cole had built a proper schoolhouse beside the main house. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Delilah placed Cole's hand on her still flat stomach. His eyes widened in understanding, then filled with tears of joy and hope. Are you certain? He asked, his voice raw with emotion. Morning Star confirmed it yesterday, Delilah said. The baby will come with the harvest. Cole gathered her into his arms, his face buried in her hair. I never thought I'd have this chance again, he whispered. Are you happy? Delilah asked. Cole looked at her, his eyes reflecting the golden light of sunset. Happy doesn't begin to describe it. You've given me back everything I thought was lost forever: purpose, hope, family. And you gave me what I never had before, Delilah said, a place where I truly belong. As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, making plans for the future, a future neither had dared to imagine a year ago when fate brought them together on a blood-soaked prairie. Their daughter was born as the last leaves of autumn fell, with hair as dark as her father's and eyes that promised to be as blue. They named her Hope, for what she represented to them both. Standing in the doorway watching Cole rock their infant daughter before the fire, Delilah reflected on the strange turns life could take. A bullet that was meant to end her life had instead led her to a new beginning. A man's cruelty had ultimately guided her to a man's kindness. What are you thinking about? Cole asked, noticing her watching them. About promises kept, Delilah said, joining them by the fire. You promised I'd never fear again. Cole smiled, shifting the sleeping baby so he could wrap his free arm around his wife. And have I kept that promise? Delilah leaned into his embrace, breathing in the scent of home and family and love. Every day, she whispered. every single day.